Hey, Lilith.
Hey, Ann, how's it going?
Good.
Cool, we're
So,
talking about stars today.
you ready to get started?
Yeah, I'm ready to go.
Okay, so um, let's talk about a project that the Office of Campus Sustainability led for the last 25 months. We had an objective project to complete what's called a STARS report, and we'll get into a second what that stands for and what it means. But it's a project where we really assess sustainability on Georgia Tech's campus. And Kelly Fox, the Executive Vice President of Administration and Finance, was our executive sponsor. And then the Office of Campus Sustainability team led this. But I think key is that we had really important partners along the way. We had Serve Learn Sustain help us with the academic metrics and assessment of this report. We had facilities management helping us with some of the operational data. We had the Institute Research and Planning Department help us with some of the deep research specific to sustainability data that we had to compile. But really, this is like a comprehensive report that is representative of over 150 data owners across 100 unique departments. So what I mean when I share all this is that it's a partnership, and it's sustainability cuts across a lot of things that Georgia Tech is doing, regardless of if you have sustainability in your title. And so it's important to recognize that as part of our process here. So what is STARS? STARS is the Sustainability Tracking Assessment and Rating System. It's really the main international framework for colleges and universities to measure sustainability performance. And performance is underlined because that it is exactly that. It's not measuring your intention, it's not measuring your ideas, it's measuring what you've actually done over a certain period of time and how your actions contribute to performance at a campus scale. And so the data that you're going to see is at a campus scale, it's not at a building scale, it's not at a department scale, it's at what Georgia Tech as an institution is doing. And the way that STARS is set up is that it's really a recognition reporting program. It's a way for higher ed institutions to benchmark themselves against established criteria and also against peers. And so within these kind of categories of academics, engagement, operations, and planning and administration, there are what's called credits, and you get points for how many credits you achieve and earn. And those points help give you a rating of platinum, gold, silver, bronze. And there are, a lot of schools now that are kind of entering into that like really highly valued platinum space. The report that we just did put Georgia Tech at silver. And the way that the credits that I mentioned, there's about 65 of them, are organized under those four categories, has subcategories that I think are really important to articulate. So when we say academics, we're talking about curriculum and research and how sustainability intersects with the curriculum and research going on at Georgia Tech. And then with engagement, there's our internal engagement programming, student work, student life, as well as that public engagement side. So how is Georgia Tech outward facing and thinking about sustainability and sustainability leadership to our community, to the state, and how are we engaging and demonstrating leadership in that way? Operations, crosses the lines of the typical environmental sustainability categories of what we think about. Planning and administration is really about what are the commitments that Georgia Tech has publicly made in from a goal setting or planning and leadership standpoint, from diversity and affordability and access. There's also a section on investments. So how does the endowment or the investments that Georgia Tech have relate to sustainable values? And then there's the well-being work and kind of HR related, compensation related, issues around the treatment of employees and all the value that people bring to an organization like Georgia Tech. I'm going to skip down a little bit here.
Can I ask
Um,
two quick questions
yeah.
on this? So, just to confirm, so STARS is a way to score universities against the same set of criteria, which they call credits. And based on how a university is doing, based on how a university is doing in each credit, they accumulate points, and those points add up for certain levels of status: platinum, gold, silver. Georgia Tech is currently at silver.
Hmm.
So that's kind of the correct terminology, right?
Exactly. That's exactly
And
right. And go ahead.
oh, sorry. Yeah, and do you know, like, off the top of your head, like an example of a university or like a local university similar to Georgia Tech that may be in that gold or platinum category?
Yeah, I think I have a chart here if I can find
I
it.
think I may be like getting ahead. My other question might also be getting ahead in that are is Georgia Tech kind of making like accumulating points on all these credits, or are some credits sort of uh, more higher scoring steadily than others, or maybe like others have stagnated. But I'll pause and ask that later.
Yeah, there's definitely some analysis that we've done around point evaluation. It's I'll get into kind of the philosophy of stars in a second, but I think it's important to not do this work um, to chase points, so to speak. What you're doing is you're saying, I want to do the best work we can as an institution in these areas, knowing that we're graded on them. And because of the good work we're doing, we automatically will achieve the points that we're achieving. And so our peers who are getting gold and platinum are not chasing points. They're just doing amazing work that contributes to the results of their report. So I think it's important
Right.
philosophically to understand that, like, you know, we're
It's a
not
side effect of doing good work. It's not
right.
sort of chasing it for the sake of it. Yeah.
And just to get a little more specific, like the point structures and stars like are can be flawed in certain ways. Like the thresholds for achieving the full points available in the academic section are much lower than in the operations section. So when you look at the operational section, you're going to think, oh, we're doing poorly in that. But actually, the threshold to for energy, let's say, is like 30 or 40%, achievement to get this many points, when in the same category on the academic side, it's only 5%. So it's up to Georgia Tech leadership, Georgia Tech community to decide, are we achieving points or are we achieving a threshold of progress and performance that we deem acceptable for our own, definition of leadership? And so, there's a lot of nuance to how this report works, but it's really just generally trying to say, how does Georgia Tech, you know, um, how can Georgia Tech kind of continue, demonstrate continuous improvement in this work, which we know is really important, and understand how we compare against our peers. Um,
Gotcha.
so, there is a snapshot. This is actually out of date, but in general, um, we're kind of, there are a few more, like Berkeley has platinum now. I think another group might have platinum as well, but like, the scores constantly change. But in general, we're kind of um, our final point score is actually 59. So our point total has changed at this point, but we are in this range of like silver, and kind of at that lower tier of our formal peers within the institutional kind of system that we look at. But to kind of think about the what this might mean more broadly, um, you know, what is the path to success and how does STARS fit into this? It's like we want to establish and meet ambitious sustainability goals as an institute. We can do that ourselves and we can set what those goals are and understand how those goals and metrics and achievement levels like fit into a report like this. Um, and that's our responsibility to do. And we can make progress incrementally, and these reports happen every 3 years. So in the next time we do a report, we might see tremendous progress in a certain area if we focus and put intention there. but really like we can think about some of this in quick wins, like things that we think we can get done in like the next few years. And then there's those strategic actions that the institute and the department I sit in, the administration and finance can do. And so I'll just share a few of those. Um, we could do things like develop a sustainable procurement policy. We don't have any definition of criteria that says um, Georgia Tech's, products that we buy and the procurement and the money we spend is going towards sustainable criteria, like products that meet sustainable criteria. And that could cut across like office supplies, food, different major categories of spend that Georgia Tech has. We have different opportunities around like these are point specific and like credit specific. So professional development is measured, which we could improve. We can improve our kind of capacity building around orientations, which we've already, since this report came out, have already started and completed in certain ways. Um, One of the areas we score low in is around renewable energy, as an offset of our carbon load. And so there's ways to study and look into things like power purchase agreements, and we already have conducted a study on this. So we're thinking about this stuff at the scale that we need to be thinking about it to make a dent in this type of report. Um, and so that's kind of like what I mean with a quick win. And then, really the things that maybe this report highlights for the Institute overall is bigger than just, what one person or one department can lead. It's things like, how do 100% of our student graduates like have sustainability literacy in their, in their time and experience and exposure in their, 4 or 5 years at Tech? How do we have a climate action plan or sustainability plan for the Institute that sets um, key performance indicators for the work? And what do we mean by progress? What do we mean by when we say we've achieved a goal? We have to be pretty specific about that. Um, we don't have kind of this internal governance, which is an opportunity, I think, for Georgia Tech to really establish that framework of what sustainability means. We just completed a plan called the Materials Conservation Management Plan, which really helps set, if we were to go zero waste on campus, what would that look like? And so we know what we need to be doing. It's just a matter of implementing it and having resources and having strategy around implementing it. And then lastly, it's we are measured in this report around employee compensation and living wage, and so there's an opportunity to really align and understand and figure out how Georgia Tech's kind of like workforce of the future fits into what that living wage definition might be. So that's kind of it from a um, what is STARS and how does that kind of factor in? Do you have any questions about that before we dive into the actual report online?
No, that makes sense. Also, the kind of the quick wins are interesting to see how Georgia Tech could make progress, not just from sort of from an administration level, but also different people on campus, how they could potentially contribute to that. The student orientation part's kind of interesting. Is that like how could you explain a little bit more about how that like what's going on there?
Yeah, STARS has a pretty clear expectation that, sustainability in an orientation program is not an add-on. It's not like a one-off event, that you can demonstrate that sustainability values and activities are embedded into the program soup to nuts, as it relates to the student experience during that time. And so I think that there's, opportunities for us to really scale what that means. Like, is it that students have a required session around sustainability? We know that the parents and the students' time is really precious. And there's very specific things that the students want to get out of that, time. And yet, if we're building a culture of sustainability, like we need to figure out how that fits in as well.
Right. Okay. Cool. Makes sense. Yeah. I think let's dive into the STARS report
Great.
and how to navigate that.
Yeah.
And I have
So,
it open up here too.
okay, good. So this is the public-facing formal report where all of the 1,700 data points that we collected over 20 months from those 150 people were compiled and where they launched. This is a public report that Georgia Tech, submitted. And so it is not, you can't download and print this. This is an online dashboard, if you will, setup that informs on our work. There's always kind of these basic normalizing pieces of information on every school's report. And if you want to look at other schools on this STARS website, you can go to participant reports and you can do searches related to the school, state, the level of there's hundreds of schools reports on here. And so this is a really valuable place to understand and see what other schools have done and what they have in their report. So introduction, the president signed a letter for us. We have a executive summary, if you will, in this that highlights kind of the key points of distinction at Georgia Tech and where we are leading. And then we have this normalizing data, so how are we defining our boundary for what data is included in this report? How are we thinking, and what are our operational characteristics that define the scale of people, places, and things that support this report in general? And then how do our demographics also fit into that as well? What the operational characteristics also go into, we're a R1 institution. We have this many, students. We have an athletics program. We don't have a hospital network. Those are the kind of things that get into that. So you can peruse at your leisure, but this is kind of the meat, and you'll see that each credit, the categories are listed here in kind of chunks, and then you have each credit with links listed in the drop-down. You can see the status and you can see the points out of the total that we achieved. And on the sidebar, you can also scroll through every single one of these credits uniquely. So if you want to jump from here to here and without doing the drop down, you can do that on the sidebar, but we'll just kind of keep it simple on this section. And you'll see that we got 25 out of 40 points. In the curriculum side, we got a large percentage of the points on the research. But in terms of a comparison related to the quartiles and the way that we measure against our peers, we're kind of in that. These bars represent where we stand within the quartile of our peers who submit reports to STARS. That's how I understand this working.
And does STARS automatically grade the information that you're inputting in here, and then that's how it kind of computes the score?
That's how I understand it. And if you have questions specifically, we can reach out to them. But typically there's also a gray bar that defines the quartiles as well, but I don't see that here, so I'm not really sure why that's not present. But
yeah, 'cause I was clicking on, as you were going over the curriculum one, I was just clicking on sort of learning outcomes, and I was trying to get a sense of, so the score is 2.02 out of 8, and I was trying to figure out, so what are where do those other 6 points come from? Or
So in this, when you click on the credit link directly, this is the submitted information, and each of these blanks represents a field, either a narrative, a drop-down bar, or a number, a numeric point that we had to submit, and that represents that 1,700 data, unique data points. When you can look through this, you can see our submission. If you want more information about how the points are calculated, what the criteria are for getting full points, you go into this credit information, and it'll break down for you each part of this credit and how the points are distributed. So it says part 1, you have to do this, part 2, you have to do this, and then the scoring for each part is this. And so it's, I'm not going to read through this here, but it's you earn the maximum if you've done, for this case,
gotcha.
It's adopting one or more sustainability focused learning outcome to the entire student body. Georgia Tech does not have a sustainably focused learning outcome to the entire student body, which would mean 100% of our students like have sustainability in their, you know, in their degree program somehow when they
Right.
graduate, and that's just not the case here. So we miss out on the first 6 points of this.
Okay.
But
Understood.
part two, we earn out of the 2 points that we got, we earned some points because we had sustainability defined in some of the degree programs that we have. And based on the number of graduates in those degree programs, we earn a percentage based on the number of
Mhm.
graduates.
Cool.
So
Makes
I
sense.
hope that answers the question, but if you ever want to know the details, go to this credit info tab
Mhm.
next to the reporting field.
Yeah, that was helpful of how of where to go to learn more about a specific score.
Yeah. And then like let's pick something else like maybe you'd be interested in, I don't know, like let's pick,
Emissions inventory.
yeah. These are little these are a little bit wonky just because it's like why aren't these just one credit, but they really are trying to break down, do you submit a greenhouse gas inventory? Yes, and okay, tell us what it is, and then you are graded on, I think this one is the total um, scope that you track for that year. I think that's what this one is. And this one I think, yeah, so we had to list like our scope 1 and 2 and 3 emissions, and it's kind of just, what is your breakdown of emissions during that time that you're graded on? And then for the next one, it gets to like the real benchmarking points. So how you um, are scored on this one is based on like your actual performance reduction of emissions against your baseline year. It's not just do you do the greenhouse gas inventory, it's like how are you performing? And for us, we have reduced our scope 1 and 2 emissions per weighted campus user by 22%, which is pretty good for a school of our size, but we have not really reduced it as a percentage of floor area. And so it's interesting to realize that we've reduced it on a per capita basis, essentially, but not on a adjusted floor area. And so what does that mean? It means that we're building a lot and the pace of our building is more than the pace of our adding students in terms of carbon.
Interesting. Okay.
That's how I think about it anyway. You guys might want to explore what that might be, but um, so let's go to maybe like energy too. Like that might be another one that you guys. And so this one again is performance, and these are harder points to achieve. We'll look at another one where it was more like inventory based, but we're a growing campus, and we have a business to operate, which requires energy. That's not going away. It's just how we grow and how we manage that growth in a productive way to meet our energy and carbon goals is essential. So, you can kind of look at the details of what we submitted and look at our total kind of energy consumption in our baseline, and also our performance year. But really what you're measuring against is the percentage reduction in total source energy consumption per unit of floor area from the baseline is 12%. So we have reduced, our energy consumption per unit floor area by 12%, which is interesting, especially compared to how that relates to carbon. So some of these things like just might not add up on the surface, but there is a reason for how they're kind of interpreted. And that's just an interesting thing that potentially students can study. But let's look at courses. I was this one probably took the most time in terms of man hours and effort and engagement of people. We had to understand through the registrar's office because it's not tracked. as well as have faculty chairs or each school chair review a list of every course that we identified by keyword as meeting some sustainable criteria. And you can see in the credit info how they're defining sustainable course. And there's a sustainably focused course and there's a sustainably inclusive course. And they get different point weightings depending on how many of each you have and how many undergraduate or graduate classes versus, that you have. But you can see that we have, based on the number of courses that are focused versus inclusive in both undergraduate and graduate, it averages out to be about 6.7% of all of the courses that we offer in 3 academic years meet some sustainability based definition. And so we still got like half the points for that threshold, as well as identifying that we have a majority, high majority of our academic departments that offer courses. In that inventory, you guys can dig deeper into this list.
That's interesting. It seems like the academic departments offering sustainability courses seems higher than the percentage of courses that have sustainability in them.
It's because it's percentage of courses offered. So it's course offerings. So if we require every student to take calculus, and there's so many offerings every 3 years, but they don't have sustainability in it, which calculus may not. It doesn't make sense necessarily to have sustainability in calculus, but the offerings overwhelm the remaining courses that are just offered every year, then
Okay.
the sustainability focused courses become a lower percentage in the total offerings because you have to
Gotcha.
include every offering that
So
Georgia
so
Tech
offering
has.
so offering here is not like we offer a course. Here's sort of our course catalog. Offering here is like the number of times a course actually runs, like a unique instance of that course.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay. Understood.
And so of the offerings, in within 3 academic years, 6% of those offerings meet sustainable criteria.
Okay. And that makes sense with those courses like calculus or sort of the intro bio ones that just run every semester that would inflate the denominator.
Hmm. So, but it is good that we have a lot of our departments have at least one course that they deem has sustainability in nature, inclusive or focused, which is I think really good. Um, and all of that, it's a simple output of just an Excel spreadsheet, but it's months and almost a year's worth of time by
Yeah,
a
yeah.
core
It
group of
seems like a
people.
lot of work. It's like just painstaking. Amazing.
Yeah, so I hope this maybe just gives you an
Yeah,
understanding of what this report is. You guys could dig in. Some of these are numeric. I showed you all examples that have a numeric weighting.
yeah.
But a lot of these under the engagement aren't numeric. They are, do you have these programs? Narrate what they are, do a survey. Like they're a lot more qualitative than quantitative in their evaluation. Um, and it covers the gamut. I mean, trademark licensing is a thing in here. Some of the things that are less obvious might be around affordability and access, and how diverse our school is. The investment around our endowment is weighted here. Um, and so I think that this report is comprehensive in how Georgia Tech can think about what sustainability might mean and how every kind of department is influential in supporting the work of what sustainability leadership looks like.
Yep. Great. Thank you for walking through that and explaining how to interpret these fields and navigate to an explanation for why the score is the way it is. I think there's, I'm scrolling through it right now. There's several ones that are interesting, like air and climate, buildings, energy, transportation, water, all this sort of stuff. So looking forward to clicking through each of these and learning more about them. Uh, yeah, do you, I know you kind of alluded to this at the beginning that we're not like chasing points, but we should be making sustained progress, doing good work in a consistent way.
Mhm.
Do you, in having to put this report together over like a, this is not the first year we've done stars, right? It's been done
It's the
for,
first year in 9 years.
oh, okay, gotcha. Right. My question was then going to be if, if some areas we're doing better in some areas than others, but that would require comparing it to like a previous year. So,
Hmm.
okay.
Yeah, the comparisons in our case just aren't very helpful. We kind of
Yeah.
have to use this year as almost our baseline moving
Baseline, yeah.
forward.
9 years ago is kind of, it's a totally different campus basically.
Right. But we can use the baselines that we've set within, for ourselves, which is around 2008 to 2010, depending on what data we have, is potentially our baseline year, for like energy and other things. But um, you know, we can really just use this as a guide to say, well, what's our path to platinum if we were to
Right.
do that, and like what would that mean? Not not just to get points again, but what are the programs or what are the structures or what does the work entail to, take our energy, reduction from 12% to 50%? Is that feasible? Is that doable? How does working on, let's say, the how does working on fixing our energy or improving our energy performance support the greenhouse gas inventory? And can we kind of think about those high impact actions that really demonstrate progress, like on multiple levels, not just on its own? And
Okay.
definitely, like, the energy ones completely relate to the greenhouse gas inventory. um, you know I'm trying to think, like, sustainable procurement, if we had a purchasing policy, would relate to all these other procurement um, thresholds, as well as our food and beverage purchasing. So it's like these are like um, the keystone the keystone concepts, I'll say, around what Georgia Tech could be prioritizing, just because they touch so many other, like, recognition areas.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Especially when we get to like scope three emissions, sustainable procurement is kind of like the supply chain and vendors and all those sorts
Hmm.
of things.
Hmm.
Okay. Very good. This has been very helpful. Thank you for walking me through this and explaining how it works. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Lalith.